Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We just got back from the Bassmaster Classic. As a lot of you know, we had a booth at the Classic. Core Tackle had a booth, so was there the entire weekend. Actually, I was there for a little bit longer than the entire weekend when you include like the setup and all of that. And it was my first overall Classic, so I don't have a ton to compare it off of, but there are definitely a few things that I was disappointed in, and there's also a bunch of things that I thought were absolutely fantastic. So I want to talk to you about those, give you just kind of my rundown on the classic, and my opinion of it, since it was my first overall classic. Now, I'm not going to compare it to the Red Crest in this video. I actually want to do a video with my wife, Sarah, who was at the events, and we can kind of talk a little bit about the differences between the two. But I want to keep this towards the Bassmaster Classic and give you some of the positives and the negatives. Now, remember, as a vendor, my experience was probably a little bit different than the general public who are there just to walk around the entire show and basically enjoy themselves, have a good time. So, having said that, I'm talking more from the vendor standpoint, but overall, it's the entire show. So we're going to talk about some of the positives and some of the negatives. Now, the first thing that I noticed was the day I got there to set up for the overall setup of the expo, setup of the booth. The day before, I ended up parking in the parking ramp. Parking on Thursday, I paid $10. Why? Because there's not a whole lot of parking in that area. It really is right downtown. There's not a lot of good parking, and you pretty much had to park in the parking lot. So it was 10 bucks. So we went ahead, set up. The next morning, we came back and parking jumped to $30 a day. So right off the bat, that set a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth that there's definitely a money grab going on from the standpoint of parking. So the entire event, Core Tackle was paying 30 bucks a day to park. Now, it's not just myself. We had a whole team of people there. So we spent quite a bit of money just in parking alone. So from that standpoint, parking rubbed me the wrong way. Along those same lines had to do with Wi-Fi to our booth. So we, we're taking payments at the booth, and to use some form of collection agency, we had to have Wi-Fi. Well, Wi-Fi for the booth was $900. That is a lot to spend on Wi-Fi. Now, adding to that was the was the issue that day one of the expo, primarily for the entire day, Wi-Fi did not even work. So not only did we pay $900 for Wi-Fi on top of the booth, which was quite expensive, we then had to go out and buy a whole nother processing system to make sure we could collect the payment. So from a Wi-Fi standpoint, we were price gouged on that. That was very much disappointing, and we weren't the only ones. It was the entire Expo system. Anybody using the Shopify system or the other main credit card system ended up having major issues based on the Wi-Fi that was provided to us. So that was another thing that right off the bat rubbed us the wrong way. So we started the day paying more for parking, got into the booth, went to do the first credit card payment, and realized that there was Wi-Fi issues. So there were a couple of pretty good downers right off the bat. As a whole, I didn't know what to expect for the booth. I had a ton of people tell me that we should take every piece of product that we have, because if you bring it to the classic, you're going to sell it. So we brought a ton of product and ended up selling a decent amount of product, but nowhere near what the expectations were, and ended up having, probably a loss for the overall trip. Now, I recognize that the value of selling there is not necessarily just to make money. We had a lot of really good contacts. We met a lot of really good people, other companies, and definitely developed some good relationships from that, and relationships that will generate profit down the road. So I'm not necessarily looking at the classics simply as a way to generate income, but at the same time, you don't necessarily want to go to events and lose money. And having said that, our booth was busy the entire time. I mean, we were selling at almost a pace that we were able to keep up with. So it wasn't necessarily like we weren't selling product, because that was not the issue at all. The fact was that the expense to bring a bunch of people there for lodging for multiple nights, the expense of the booth, of the Wi-Fi, the parking, the food, everything. It really does add up over a long period of time when you have six or seven people there for the entire time. So, uh, having said that, the classic was told, or we were told, that there would be, thousands and thousands of people. I think last year at the classic, they had roughly 130,000 people attend the classic. There's no doubt that the numbers were very good in terms of total people. Now, having said that, I will say I don't believe we came probably anywhere near 130,000 people. I also think the based on talking with some other vendors there and people who run the classic, that those spectator numbers tend to be off quite a bit, because they end up counting spectators at each of the events. So in this case, you had the expo, you had the live going on outside, you had the weigh-in, and if somebody attended all three of those, they might count them as three. In fact, if they attended the expo, then went outside, then went to the weigh-in, then went back to the expo, they might be counted four times. And the fact is, if they go in and out of the expo multiple times, they could be counted 20 or 30 times a day. So I do think the spectator numbers were down, or at least were overinflated, because again, I can't compare them to previous classics. But I can tell you, the vendors I talked to that were at, say, last year's classic in Knoxville, they said the overall numbers were nowhere near to be compared. They were more in line with traditional Tulsa expos, which again, I don't know necessarily what that means. But having said that, I do have one suggestion for Bassmaster moving forward with respect to the expo, and it would be probably to start it a little bit earlier and end it a little bit earlier, because as soon as the weigh-ins start, everyone goes from the expo over to the weigh-in site, and from that standpoint, the expos are pretty much dead for the last couple hours of the day. So I personally would have liked to have started them an hour earlier in the day and ended them an hour earlier. So I don't want to just sit here and make it sound like I had negative things. I really do feel like overall it was very good. Um, the energy was unlike anything I've seen at a sporting event. The overall feel of it is that this is the Super Bowl. Fans are excited to be there. Companies are excited to be there. Everyone is there. I mean, literally everyone. Doesn't matter what organization you fish, doesn't matter what company you're with. There are people from everywhere in the fishing industry that are there, which I don't necessarily feel like happens at most other events. So that was a really cool thing. I also would say that the energy also relates over to a lot of the different events that are taking place. So, from a family perspective, this is an event you want to go to. Everyone is treated well. There are tons of freebies. There's tons of autograph signings. There's tons of events that are going on. It's just a happening party. I mean, it really is like 3 days of party, which is a pretty cool atmosphere to be involved in. I mean, I firmly believe that the next time I go, I'm going to be taking my boys with, and we're probably going to go as a fan and not as a spectator, because I think it would be something that my boys would absolutely love. I mean, whether it's the Yamaha and Skeeter Pro signings, where you get a free hat and a T-shirt and you go get every autograph you want. And that's not Skeeter and Yamaha. I mean, there are tons and tons of this going on across the entire expo. All the different things. It's just a very, very well run expo as a whole. Now, I will say, from a venue standpoint, there were a lot of small rooms. I would have preferred, if I could choose, a venue where the expo is all in one giant room or multiple giant rooms, because there were a lot of areas that people just didn't realize had vendors in it. But overall, the atmosphere is just an incredible feeling. When it comes to uh, the layout of everything, it was just it's as much as I don't necessarily like the expo in terms of how it laid out, that part of the city works extremely well. You have hotels, expo, weigh-in site, all within basically a block. And then on top of that, they were able to get the roads blocked off that kind of connected everything. So like you had the live show going on outside, you had food trucks in one area. So it was really like they had a 3 square block area that was just blocked off for the general public and the bass fans. And that's really a cool thing where it just brought that entire corner, that little piece of the city really just became Bass Central. And that was a cool thing where, it wasn't like, okay, we're going to go to the weigh-in site over here and the expo's a mile over here. You could just simply cross the street and you were where you needed to go. So that was a really cool thing. And I realized, a lot of that just has to do with the venue location in the city. But in this case, that I definitely see why Tulsa is a good site to go to with respect to how the actual facilities lay out. So that was awesome. Like I mentioned, the entire fishing industry was there. The number of pros that were there was pretty incredible. It doesn't matter what level you fish. It just seemed like everyone you've ever met along the way was there. And I got to tell you one very distinct thing. Not again to compare to Red Crest because there is no compare. The classic was light years ahead of what Red Crest was. The number of people that I have met just through my travels that I ran into there just shows how people just come to this event. I'm talking everything from neighbors of mine to people that I have fished with in Florida and around the country, out in Lake Mead at the US Open. I saw some anglers from there. I mean, everyone just comes to this. So it really was a very cool thing where everyone just gravitates to this event. I personally had not seen that before. I mean, you could say with ICAST, you've got industry, but you don't have the fans involved from that standpoint. Um, from uh, again, with respect to the vendors and having everyone there, there really was like a very cool grouping of everything from like the biggest brands in the industry to some of the coolest small, custom makers that were there. So if you're a fan of tackle, it was a good thing to be at. You really could see all of the new product coming out. There were like swim bait makers like KGB was there, swim bait makers that make baits that you cannot generally get. They had baits there for sale, and that was a pretty cool thing to me. So I love that. When you start looking at the event itself, not to really touch on the fishing, but I will say the weigh-in was awesome. There one suggestion I would have with respect to the weigh-in has to do with the winner. In this case, when Justin Hamner won, they announced him a winner, and then there was kind of like this little pause before like you've got all the confetti. Uh, I personally would have liked to have seen him just run up there and have everything go off crazily and then hand him the trophy after all that happened, because it did seem like the excitement level dropped as soon as they announced him as the winner because there was nothing to continue to spur that excitement. There wasn't the fireworks and confetti, which was not until several minutes, like 5 or 6 minutes later, at which point there was definitely some fans that were already leaving. So I kind of felt like it was a weird thing to see people leaving before he actually had the true celebration. So I would personally like to see that backwards. And as a side note, the weigh-in was great. It's hard. You cannot, have that same excitement without the weigh-in. I think I love the catchway release format that I have in BPT, but from the standpoint of the weigh-in, the excitement was great. Dave Mercer is phenomenal. Like I don't know how he does what he does. I don't know how he knows the stats. I don't know if that's all from memorization or maybe he's got some way of reading notes or maybe he's got an earpiece in. I don't know, but he's phenomenal at what he does. He just generates that excitement level. And there were multiple times throughout the final day weigh-in where somebody would say something, an angler would say something, and then he was able to like turn that into like instant jokes or use that throughout the weigh-in at some point. So his wittiness is off the hook, like his ability to control the crowd. He did a phenomenal job. And I honestly I believe that the weigh-in, a lot of that is based on him, not to give him any additional pressure, but like he was great. He was really good, and they've got somebody that can generate that excitement throughout the crowd. So from that standpoint, it was really good. Overall, a great week. As a fan of the sport, it was great. It was I'm disappointed in myself for holding out this long. I've always said I wouldn't go until I was fishing it. Well, now I feel like I want to go every year. As a fan, I want to go every year. I don't know that I'll have a core tackle boot there again, because I think I could accomplish a lot without having the boot there. And really, what the boot did is it anchored me to a certain spot, and it limited me from partaking in a lot of the different events that were going on. But I feel very confident that the family and I will be there next year. I think it's in Texas, uh, as a fan of the sport. Work a few boots, but mostly as a fan. So, anyways, that's kind of the takeaway. There were definitely some negatives, but overall, great event. Bass has a lot of that stuff figured out, a little tweaks, and I think it could be even better. And yeah, I would guess I would encourage everyone in the future. If you haven't been to a classic, I think you might really want to put it on your bucket list of things to do. So that's my take, guys. Tomorrow, maybe we'll get back into some fishing tip videos. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks for your continued support. And I look forward to another one coming out tomorrow.